Minot City leaders have approved a first reading of next year's budget, but not before a marathon council meeting last night, stretching nearly 7 hours and spilling into this morning. Kiona Rivera joins us in studio to break down the biggest debates, from police staffing shortages to plans for economic growth. Kiona?
Good evening, Joe. The council heard from citizens, city staff, business owners, and farmers on what they think about the future of Minot as the council works to develop next year's budget. Minot Police Chief Michael Fry told the council his department has at least 16 vacancies and at least 4 others are leaving within the year. With upcoming retirements, Councilmember Mike Blessum proposed removing 1 lieutenant position. However, Fry said they've been working hard to rebuild what he says is spiraling out of control.
I want to make sure that this department is healthy. I'm trying to manage us through chaos and trauma and get us back to healed.
He says the department will see a, quote, huge increase following recent recruitment efforts. Blessum changing course and voting against his own motion.
Okay, let's go with this lieutenant. And the hope will be that our department really starts to hum. And I'm thinking that that's where we're headed. I think with the chief's leadership and his team there, we're headed in the right direction with that.
Some citizens spoke in support of giving more to public safety.
I suggest that you take that money from the half-cent sales tax of the first penny and transfer it to our first responders so they can do their job.
The other hot topic before the council, economic growth in the Magic City.
We're still raising the property tax on everybody else in this town too, so they are not seeing the economic benefit from the economic development that we're doing. I can promise you that.
Citizens testifying on the impacts of tax hikes.
During the next budget cycle, my property taxes were increased, which resulted in an increase of about $100 per month in my house payment.
In August, then Council President Mark Janser proposed lowering the percentage of sales tax dollars for economic development from 15 to 10% and increasing sales tax dollars by 5% for property tax relief.
For every successful city in North Dakota and across the country has one thing in common: they invest in themselves. Minot shouldn't be any different. We cannot afford to lose momentum now.
State Senator Jose Castaneda pointing to sales tax for the answer.
I really do believe that we need economic development, and it should come from pennies on sales tax, because that is a direct reflection of the work they're doing.
The council voted 5-2 to direct staff to prepare a sales tax ordinance that allows for flexibility in the distribution of funds and fund the local chamber from sales tax. That also includes the remainder of the 15% in economic development to go to the general fund. The council voted to create an analytical administrator for the PD, a similar role in the fire department. They also added 1 unfunded patrol position. That vote also included retaining funding for the fire department's PPE of roughly $86,000. Here's what the budget timeline looks like. After all that, the council approved the budget on first reading. Before the council's actions, the budget sat at $211 million. It still needs to be approved on second reading before its final adoption on October 6th.